This is the Sirui 35mm Saturn anamorphic lens, boasted to be a perfect companion for my Ronin 4D because of its crazy lightweight build. And right off the back, I genuinely wanted to hate this lens. Like, not even being hyperbolic, Sirui reached out to me and asked me to review this thing, and I just straight up said no. Because this lens didn't look the part for me. But after a bit of discussion, I tried it, knowing I would hate this thing, and boy, do I hate being wrong. What's going on, guys? Today I have something on the channel that I've wanted to talk about for years. Like, since I started a YouTube channel, I've wanted to get into anamorphic lenses, how they work, what they do, why you use them, and I finally got my hands on one. So to help with all of this, this is the Sirui 35mm T2.9 baby anamorphic lens that produces insane results and is priced at a good point for beginners like me who are trying to get into the anamorphic lifestyle, who kind of don't know what they want but would love to try something out. That's what this lens is, but I want to bring this lens to you and bring the whole anamorphic lifestyle to you to see if it's something that fits for you as it does for me. So I'm really genuinely excited to get in to talk about anamorphic lenses. But what are anamorphic lenses? If you are looking for a super detailed explanation on what an anamorphic lens is, I suggest Josh Yo, Make Art Now, or CVP. They do an excellent job deep diving into lenses like this and lenses that are 8 times more expensive than this, and they do a way better job of explaining this than I ever can. But if you want a quick run through, anamorphic lenses have a regular shaped glass system that basically give you more information on the horizontal sides of the frame, squeezing the image for your sensor a little bit more. That way in post, you can de-squeeze it and get a very nice, wide cinematic look. Most of the time, it has this squarish looking front glass. It's a little bit different than the traditional lens, but they basically squish the image to a specific degree. Usually that's denoted on the lens, and you have to go into post and de-squeeze it. This being a 35mm 1.6 time anamorphic is basically going to give me the field of view of a 22mm, but the depth of field of a 35mm. So what that does is this gives my footage a 2:8:1 aspect ratio. So instead of being 16:9 like we have here, we're gonna squeeze in the frame a little bit more, get those nice huge black bars, and get a really good widescreen look. This creates some stunning imagery. 35mm being one of my favorite lenses to shoot at, and now having it get the field of view of a 22mm while still having the feel of a 35 creates such a unique experience that it feels like simple, mundane tasks become like cinematic and feel like I'm storytelling much easier. Now, with all of the technical things out of the way, I want to give you an idea of what it's been like using this lens for the last 3 to 4 months. When it comes to my commercial filmmaking, this thing is almost non-existent. What I currently do is not a good fit for this lens, and for people to want me to shoot like this, my clients would have to be experimental and let me kind of flex my muscles with this wide aspect ratio. So I haven't gotten a chance to use it on a commercial project outside of doing like car commercials and stuff. With this, I've been able to take 2 really widescreen shots of cars and stack them on top of each other to create a very unique look for commercial work. But outside of that, this lens isn't for commercial use in my case. Now, saying you can't use it for commercial is just wrong, because this thing creates incredible results. It's just the aspect ratio. Things I shoot are usually for TV. They're 16:9s, they're very straightforward, and it would look really weird to have a 2:8:1 aspect ratio video pop up on everybody's TV. But for iPhones and stuff like that, incredible. But with that being said, if we remove the client work, remove the paid stuff, the things you do to keep your lights on, this is my favorite way to film right now. This thing makes the mundane beautiful. When it comes to my everyday life, this thing is light enough to travel with me literally everywhere. It's a perfect travel companion because of how small this setup is, but it's unique enough to stand out with the looks that it gives me. That anamorphic feel, that weird depth of field and wide frame of view is just so nice and so unique, and it really does make the mundane feel special. That is what this lens does best. So if you're looking to storytell in a very unique way, and you want something that is just a little bit different, this is probably it for you. Like, this is something that I wish I would have got it sooner almost, because back when I used to create as like an 18-year-old, I used to put those huge black bars on top of all my footage just to give it a cinematic look. But there's something different about having the actual feel of an anamorphic lens come through your footage, because the depth that it gives you is so nice. So personal childhood creator biases aside, let's talk about the pros and cons of owning a lens like this. Pros: this thing is incredibly lightweight and built like a tank. It is super small, so it can travel with you wherever you want to go. And yeah, it's metal with carbon fiber, so it creates a lightweight feel with, you know, having a good balance to the camera without it being, you know, too front heavy or too back heavy. I really like that, because that means this can go on gimbals. But for me, you know, I like to use the Ronin 4D. So if you are a 4D owner operator, like myself, this lens fits perfectly without having to really go through the balancing process, because a lot of the lenses I use have to have a really nice size counterweight on the back, and the 4D may struggle sometime with that, but this thing being as small as it is, I don't really have to worry about that with this. It also is lighted up to fit on an FPV drone, so drone pilots, you can definitely look out for this too if you want a weirdly unique feel to your drone footage. You get the option to choose whether you want blue flares or a natural look. I am always about the natural look flares, because I feel like I can use them in more situations than I can the blue. I don't want to get tired of the blue flares, and I'm scared that I would, but natural flares is really nice. And speaking of flares with this thing, it's my cat's feeding time, so they panic. Okay, so this is Mika and this is Sora. They hate being picked up, but they are so freaking cute. Yeah, I'm a whole dad out here in these streets now. Speaking of flares with this thing, it's not overkill like I thought it was going to be, and I'm so happy for that. This has a nice natural feel to it. The flares aren't too distracting. They add a lot of character to the look, which makes this lens feel a little bit more unique. This is relatively affordable compared to many other lenses. This is a $1,200 to $1,300 lens, but other anamorphics in the competition are like $8,000. And the reason I've never done anything with anamorphics is because they're expensive to rent and they're expensive to own. And I haven't had a project that I want to use them on, but owning something like this is really nice, because it's always with me and I get to travel, go to these amazing places and have this handy. Now, the trade-off, and speaking of trade-offs, let's just step into the cons. This is a T2.9. Now, I am a spoiled little brat who uses photo lenses occasionally and have a nice f1.4 crispy blurred background. Contradictions. This lens being a T2.9, I couldn't get that super blown out feel that I wanted, but that's just me being spoiled, because the images I was able to get with this thing were beautiful. The minimum focusing distance on this thing is 3 feet, which at first glance doesn't sound like a lot, but pairing that with 35 millimeters with a 22 millimeter field of view, you can't get as close as you want to certain subjects. Now, it didn't bother me once I got outside and started using this thing. I really leaned into letting the subject move around in the frame rather than me doing so much with the camera. And if you want to fix that minimum focusing distance problem, you can use diopters. You know, you sacrifice your infinity focus to get a closer focusing distance. But I don't have diopters on me, and it's, you know, not that big of a deal in my eyes, but I'll try to get some in here so I can kind of test it out and let you guys know what I think about that. If you are inside, you may notice heavy pin cushioning. Like, it warps lines sometimes. And that was one of the reasons I wanted to hate it. Like, I used this thing in my office and I walked around with it and I was like, this is the worst lens I've ever owned. But the moment I stepped outside and applied this lens to the real world, yeah, it quickly went from being, I kid you not, my least favorite, I'm going to send this back, to something that I really want to keep this lens on me. Another con, maybe focusing for you. Now, this isn't a problem for me since I have a ton of wireless focusing systems, but this is a manual focus lens. You know, it has focus gears and you're going to have to set something up. It's good to get a focusing wheel on the side if you want to use a handheld, or, you know, it's light enough to where you can just sit here and do that. But that brings me to my next point. If you cannot view de-squeezed anamorphic footage natively on camera or in your monitor, you may have a problem with that. Thankfully, all the cameras I use work perfectly. The Ronin 4D has de-squeeze built in. The FX3 has de-squeeze built in. So I don't really have to worry about that. But looking at non-de-squeeze anamorphic footage is really, really trippy. And I would definitely look into getting a monitor or making sure your monitor has support, because you're going to lose a lot of screen real estate being a 1.6 times de-squeeze. And that's just something I've noticed while using the lens through day to day. Okay, overall, not too many drawbacks, but just stuff that you should be aware of when you're switching to something like anamorphic. These are things that are brand new to me. As I said, I'm somebody who's a beginner in creating anamorphic footage, but I really do like having this step, because having such a tangible option, you know, because there's basically no competition in this price range. So having a tangible option for anamorphic footage is really, really nice, and I want to lean into it more heavily. So I may go off the deep end and start creating a ton of anamorphic stuff personally. So be on the lookout for that. But if you're looking to get into using anamorphic footage, if you're looking to get into shooting the feel of it and you just want to try it out, I'll leave this thing linked in the description below. They have multiple other options, but being a Ronin 4D user, operator, owner, this lightweight 35mm seemed like a good fit for me, but I will definitely be trying out a few more options just to make sure that I have a well-rounded look at the entire lineup. But with that all being said, that's all I have for you today, guys. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you loved it, consider subscribing, because I'm bringing you more content just like this every week. So you guys stay safe, you're loved, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.